Hey everyone, this is Jason again from B2B Better. For today's episode, we are going to talk to you a little bit about our process in taking a show from a nebulous concept in the minds of many into something that drives real commercial results for your business. We're also going to talk a little bit about the difference between production and producing a podcast. Here we go. So I think one of the things that makes B2B Better different from all of the other podcast and video agencies out there is that we are very deliberate in calling ourselves a podcast marketing agency. In fact, I say that so much here in the office that the team tease me relentlessly about it, and it has caused me a degree of anxiety. But that is for another episode. So we call ourselves a podcast marketing agency because we over-index on the marketing part of that statement, right? The idea of having a podcast for a B2B brand should always be that the podcast is a vehicle that takes us from not having enough commercial results or momentum to having more commercial results and momentum than we can handle. And that is not going to happen if we create something that will be binned after 6 episodes and looked back on as a vanity exercise. We are marketers first that happen to do podcasting. And as much as we love the medium, it's all about how does this tool plug into our go-to-market and ultimately accelerate everything that we're trying to do, from generating pipeline to creating revenue and ultimately turning a profit. And so all of this happens within something we call our podcast to pipeline framework, which is a systematized way of approaching podcasts from developing the strategy to producing amazing content and then distributing it to the customers that matter. And so it's broken down into 6 steps. The first step is what we call strategy development. And this is the fundamentally most important part of the entire project. And actually, surprisingly, the piece of building a podcast that most brands actually totally omit to do. Instead of asking yourself the question, what microphone should I get for my podcast? You should actually be asking yourself the question, what does success look like? Who is my target audience? What are the messages that I want to get across to that target audience? How does this all wrap up into a comprehensive, full funnel content and distribution strategy? And that is what we here at B2B Better spend a lot of time digging into on behalf of our clients. It starts with a strategy workshop where, with stakeholders from marketing, sales, product, customer success, executive leadership, we get under the hood of everything there is to know about the business and what it is that they're trying to achieve, so we can create something called our show blueprint. The show blueprint is a comprehensive document that outlines the what, why, who, and how of this podcast. What is it about? Who is it for? Why does it exist? And how are we going to get to where we want to get to in terms of results? It's incredibly important to develop a show blueprint and get feedback from all stakeholders across the business that will or should have an opinion on the podcast, because it is what is going to prevent you from getting down the production road and then suddenly getting hit with a total left field comment or piece of feedback that derails the entire experience. So start with strategy and development. The second phase of the podcast to pipeline framework is called funnel mapping. Again, incredibly important and directly tied to the strategy and development phase that we spoke to a moment ago. It's about understanding the stages of buyer awareness and then developing a plan that maps the podcast against those stages of awareness. A lot of the brands that we speak to here at B2B Better have a pretty siloed view of the role that a podcast can play in their commercial efforts. It's very much considered a top of funnel brand awareness exercise. But actually, with the right strategy and when thinking about the entire buyer journey, the podcast can accelerate momentum from awareness to consideration to evaluation and then ultimately to conversion. And we have a really interesting tool that we use here at B2B Better called the distribution grid, which allows you, if you're developing a podcast, to very quickly and easily identify how to develop segments that map against the different stages of buyer awareness and gives you clear instructions on exactly how to distribute those segments when repurposing this content to get it in front of your target buyers. And if you're interested in learning more about that distribution grid and you want to copy yourself, drop me a DM on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share it with you. The third phase of the podcaster pipeline framework is called pre-production. And so this is when we have decided on the content and the distribution strategy for the podcast, and we need to start actually pulling it all together. So within this phase includes things like script writing. What questions are we going to be asking our potential guests? Guest booking and research. Who are the guests that we want to interview on this show? And how are we going to convince them to come onto this podcast? We've actually recorded a great episode on that we will drop a link to in the show notes of this one. What is the visual and audio treatment of the podcast going to look and sound like? How do we put in place a great foundation of production that's going to make things super easy, super clear, and super impactful when we actually get behind the mic and start recording episodes? The fourth phase of our podcaster pipeline framework is called creative treatments. And so essentially, this is everything to do with the active and post-production of the project. Sitting down with our guests and recording episodes. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about the difference between producing and production, because there is a difference between them, which is not commonly understood. So a lot of the businesses that we speak to that are thinking about launching podcasts think what they need is production support only, in that they need someone who can take raw video, cut it together, and then present it back to them as a complete podcast. And there's absolutely a need for amazing production talent on a project in the form of video editors and graphic designers and motion graphic designers. And I'm very proud to say that we have a lot of them working here at B2B Better. But actually, what a lot of brands need beyond just the production is the producing support. And so producing is having editorial oversight and control and a strategy around what is the content that we're creating from a storytelling perspective, and are we achieving what it is that we're looking to achieve in this recording. And so that means actually having a producer sat on the recording with you that can hold you as the host and your guest accountable for ensuring that we're getting the right message across. And again, working with a podcast marketing partner like B2B Better gives you the benefit of both worlds. Amazing Netflix quality production and essential and critical producing support that gets your message across in the right way. The fifth phase of the podcaster pipeline framework is called integrated campaigns. And so think about this as your distribution and promotional strategy. Now, distribution and promotion is an essential part of any podcast marketing strategy, particularly for platforms like Apple and Spotify, who have terrible organic discovery. The work that you do across other channels and other platforms is going to be critical for ensuring that you are hitting your goals and your targets. But what's important to know is that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. If you spend any time on LinkedIn, you will inevitably see someone talking about podcasting as this amazing thing because you can create one long form asset and then repurpose it into 100 different things. What we've found here at B2B Better is actually what that ends up inevitably doing is creating a ton of redundancy where you create artifacts and assets that don't actually matter, that they're not actually going to move the needle. And so no podcast distribution, promotion, or repurposing strategy can or should look the same. It depends on who you are as a business, who is your target customer, where they are spending their time finding and researching information on your industry and specifically their problems within that industry, and then developing an integrated campaign that's going to get your content into those places. If you're building a show for brand awareness, you may find that an investment in an ad strategy where you create a ton of social clips that are super targeted to a broad range of your ICP makes a lot of sense. Whereas if your podcast is built for an ABM strategy, where really it's about targeting a very clear and specific set of targeted customers, then you may not care about ads at all. And actually, it's about how do we use our sales team as a distribution channel to ensure that this podcast content is finding its way into our prospecting sequences. So the fifth phase of the podcaster pipeline framework, integrated campaigns, it's not just about publishing and promoting content and hoping it sticks. It's about creating a distribution and promotion strategy that is tailored to your audience, but also the objectives that it is that you're looking to hit, and rolling that out in a sprint-based campaign on a monthly basis. And then the sixth and final phase of the podcaster pipeline framework is reporting and optimization. We do a lot of work here at B2B Better upfront when launching podcasts. In fact, our strategy and development and funnel mapping phase can take anything between 4 and 6 weeks because we go super deep on developing shows that are going to have reach, but more importantly, resonance. But whatever you create with as much research as you do, there's nothing that compares to getting real-time market feedback. A show is not a static thing. It should be a living and breathing thing. And that requires someone, whether it's on the brand side or on the agency side, to be accountable for reviewing and reporting on the success of a show at both an episodic level, at a promotional channel level, and then ultimately at a show level. What's working? What's not working? What indicators do we have that our customers resonate with this type of content over that type of content? And then how does all that information feed back into the strategy that we have developed? Do we need to keep things as they are? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to double down? There is a wealth of data out there for podcasters and brands that run podcasts to understand how exactly their content is landing with their customers, how their content is landing with their audience, but it requires a clear and systemized way of capturing that data, separating it from the noise, and generating insights that can ultimately feed into a ongoing strategy. And so that's it. That's our podcaster pipeline framework here at B2B Better and how we work. If you are interested in learning more about our services and how we can help you build a podcast that drives pipeline you can prove, we would love to hear from you. We are dropping the ways that you can contact us in the show notes of this episode, and we will see you next time.